that was very quick, I should say, and actually everybody here was expecting that it's going to explode. An explosion is going to take place, certainly, and it happened. So my first assessment that is, of course, lots of things has come into one. I do not speak about scandals, but I say that economics, of course, is one of the main reasons here in Britain why the Boris Johnson has lost confidence of voters in Conservative Party as well, and probably a lack of strategic vision. Probably, I know that business people is not glad at all that after Brexit there has been steps actually to put Britain forward in terms of business, not very much push by in this direction, and of course people, those who are living not in London, not in Kent, they are suffering because of prices, because of high prices, taxes, and all of that. Promises by the government has not been fulfilled.
What do you think his legacy will be?
Well, I do believe that he concentrated too much on geopolitical situation, on Ukraine, certainly, on these difficult issues of geopolitics, and he left behind very much country, people, state of economics, and this is what has brought this outcome.
Is it fair to say that Russia is glad to see the back of him?
No, we are neutral. We do not have any assessment. Actually, of course, we would prefer someone who is not so antagonistic and so belligerent, because what he is doing, I frankly believe that it's a mistake. It is a strategic miscalculation of what is going to be, what is going to happen to Ukraine. And he is he's trying to engage Ukrainian leadership into continuation of war. So this is wrong.
So earlier today, Dmitry Peskov said that Johnson didn't like us and that we didn't like Johnson. Is that an opinion that you share?
Well, I will say Johnson 2 years ago and now are perhaps two different people. When he was a Minister of Foreign Affairs, I remember that he was eager to do something with Russia. Right now, he is in the first rows of those who just want Russia to escape from the map, or to get erased from the map. This is not a possibility. We will stay where we are. And sooner or later, of course, UK leadership, whoever it will be, will have to think about that.
And turning to who that may be, do you have hopes that a new leader will improve the situation in terms of the bilateral relationship, or it could worsen further? How do you see that developing?
I will try not to speculate on this issue at all. I have seen today's newspapers. There are lots of ideas, lots of versions, and Conservative Party is going to elect someone. But of course, my view is very clear. So the leader of the country should concentrate not only on the outside affairs, on international affairs, but also on the country situation, on its economy in the first place.
So some of the names that are in the mix, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, Defense Secretary Ben Wallace, these are people who Russia has dealt with, Russia is very familiar with. What would you assess if they were to take the top job? How would that change things for you?
I will say that these two ministers, they have been in Russia once. They are not very much acquainted with Russian politics, and moreover, as I understand, they do not really realize reasons of what is happening. And I would advise very much to those involved in international politics to get more information. Information is a key here, and I see that the situation is that it is only one-sided information that is coming in the United Kingdom and from US. Mostly it is coming from Kiev authorities of what is going on the grounds and what is really the situation. And UK is looks sometime, I was living in the time of the Soviet Union, so I know what is ideology and how one-sided information is affecting the leadership. My understanding is that UK leadership is a victim of its own propaganda right now.
Mm-hmm. So that means if the leader changes, then you don't see any change in UK's policy towards Ukraine or Russia?
As I am seeing right now, there is no difference between in the on foreign affairs between conservatives and Labour Party. They have the same opinion, and there is a certain unity in the government. And unfortunately, this does not come out. It does not come from the real understanding of what's going on the grounds and what are the roots, what is the reasons of what is happening. But it is just a kind of short-sightedness, let us say that, an absence of strategic vision.
Okay, well, let's turn to the situation on the ground and what's going on in terms of what Russia calls the special military operation. Why is it taking so long?
It takes so long because the actions by the Russian forces over there, they are incremental. They are not attacking in masses just to reduce losses, to reduce man losses, and to use more equipment, more precise strikes, and so on. So that is what we are doing. It is that we have liberated the whole area of Lugansk region, and steadily they continue to move, steadily but quickly, they continue to move to two major towns in Donetsk Oblast, Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, yes. Mm-hmm.
When you woke up on February the 24th and found out about the start of the military action in Ukraine, did you think that in mid-July you would still be here with Russia only having liberated, as Russia says, one of the self-proclaimed republics in the Donbass?
No one could predict at the moment what, and really it is questions which I cannot answer at length, because no one was aware what were the plans and how it will move. I have seen that there are movement from three directions, but as I understand, the movement on Kiev was just an idea to stretch Ukrainian forces, outstretch Ukrainian forces, and the target, as always, has been indicated. It was Donbass, I mean Lugansk and Donetsk, helping them to liberate these areas that has been seized in 2015. And actually, I see it is the end of the civil war that has broke out in 2015.
Do you think if Ukraine hadn't been supplied with Western arms from Britain, the United States and others, that this conflict would be over by now?
At the moment, we do not see that there is a role for Western weapons, with exception of one thing. The Ukrainian army use Western weapons to bomb, to shell Donetsk. It is the peaceful people over there, because in Donetsk there are no military targets, but shelling of Donetsk increases, and in some days it reaches about 500 projectiles being launched to Donetsk, and they are killing people over there. Also, the caliber of this projectile is NATO caliber. It is 155 millimeters. So we clearly see that this weapon is used over there, targeting and killing people. And this is, well, I wouldn't say a crime, but it is associations with the military crime that is going on here.
So if you say that Western weapons are playing no significant role, then why do we hear so much from officials in Moscow, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, about the supply of Western weapons?
Well, this is bad because it prolongates conflict.
It would have ended sooner had the West not provided all these arms.
Probably, yes. I do not exclude this, but actually one should understand that the thing is that Ukraine is full of weapons, because production of weapons and storage of the Soviet-type weapons after the disappearance of the Soviet Union was huge, and they have many storage of it. They cannot output, of course, it's an old type of weapons, but it is being used and still not eliminated totally.
Okay, you mentioned a minute ago the Russia strategy is trying to prevent losses. You said last week, after the shelling and incident at the shopping center in Kremenchuk, that the civilian deaths were collateral damage that happened as a result of the special military operation. Is that something that Russia is willing to accept, this ongoing collateral damage in terms of civilian casualties?
Well, anyone who is associated with military armies will say that collateral damage is unavoidable. But when you see the photos of Kremenchuk Center, you see that it suffered because of fire, not because of rocket. If a rocket could go from the top down to the center, it would be explosion and total devastation of the place. But it is intact.
And what about Russian casualties? We haven't had an update since March about the number of Russian fatalities, but by many estimates, dozens are falling every day. Is there a point at which, for you as a Russian administration, the toll this conflict is taking on Russia's armed forces and Russian soldiers becomes too much?
The point is that we do not send, not me, but Ministry of Defense do not send conscripts to this place. It is only professionals, those who are contracting the army to do this. We have had soldiers as well that has fought in many places like Syria and others who are professional soldiers. And I know there are many volunteers as well who prefers to fight for money. So that's their striking contract, and they are going over the years. So that is, and I do not see that any increase of group of forces has been done.
So they understand the risks, and
Certainly.
you have a higher tolerance for their losses.
Certainly. And you are aware of salary that has been paid to them, and actually if they are going to this endeavor, then they understand that what they are doing, what are the risks, of course, comparable risks, and what will happen after they are going to, if really a casualty will happen. So the families, they are receiving quite serious sum of money from the government, which does not happen in Ukraine at all.
Mm-hmm. You're obviously an experienced diplomat. You've been involved in many negotiations with NATO partners as well throughout the years. Why do you think there hasn't been any progress towards a peace deal so far?
Two reasons. First, in the very beginning of the operation, we have heard from Kiev that it could be a negotiated peace soon. President Putin has stopped the army to stop the operation. They discontinued the movement of forces over there, and we were prepared to negotiate it. Unfortunately, it didn't happen because Ukrainians continue to fight. Then we have made several attempts to negotiate a peace deal. We have heard once in the middle of April that Ukrainians were serious about that, but then we have sent to them the draft agreement based on their own ideas back. Since mid of April, we didn't hear anything from Ukrainians about the possibility of negotiated peace. And we understand the reason. It is because Boris Johnson, let us be fair enough, he has gone to Kiev after three presidents, Macron, Chancellor of Germany, and Italian Draghi. He visited Zelensky and tried to talk to him about the possibility of a peace deal. Then Johnson has gone next day and said, no peace deal. And you should fight. This issue should be resolved on the battlefield. And so what? It's going to be resolved on the battlefield, but not in favor of Ukrainians pretty soon. So what's next? What will be the next policy of it? What will be the exit strategy from it? Because as we see in Washington, they have already started to think about an exit strategy, but not here in UK. He continues to be very belligerent and still engaged. In Britain, they do think that with 10 new artillery, self-propelled artillery, they will change the battlefield. So it is totally wrong. It's miscalculation, strategic miscalculation.
I want to turn to the fate of the two British fighters who were sentenced to death in Donetsk, Aiden and Sean Pinner. What contact with officials here in London have you had over them?
Yes, I understand what you are asking, but I can say that only we have had a formal address here in London and in Moscow about that these two guys exist, and a phrase like "we put all responsibility on you, on Russia, for them." Which is a bit funny. So there was no demand for mediation, no demand for release, anything like that. Let's talk about the fate and what can be done in the situation. Nothing. It is just these high phrases. I'm not sure arrogant was the word you used in your paper. Arrogant phrase that we put all responsibility on you. It is not our responsibility. They are in jurisdiction on a different, of a different country, which we have recognized. And it is just wrong to think that we can influence them with anything. So they are going to decide, because they have fought against this country and against Russians, yes, that are living in this country. And well, I hope, of course, I hope very much that it will be on the positive side. But just to talk, as your authorities are saying, they are talking with Kiev about the future. It is not sufficient.
But if Russia wanted to, you could make a phone call and they could be released within a matter of minutes, surely.
No. And so what? If anyone from London has asked us to do this, no.
And if they did?
Let's see what's going to happen.
So you're saying you may be open to that possibility of putting pressure on the authorities in Donetsk?
Well, I'm not the competent authority to talk about this. I'm not empowered about that. But I can imagine that cutting off all relationship or trying to isolate us, which is not possible from the other world. The world is big, which is G20 is today sitting in Indonesia, but trying to cut off all relationship, it is damaging for those who has originated it.
How, as an experienced diplomat with a long experience at the very top level of MID, how do you see this ending? How will this conflict end in Ukraine? What are the lines?
It is difficult for me to predict, but if actually, what personally I can imagine that, of course, we are going to liberate the whole of Donbass. And of course, it is difficult to predict the withdrawal of our forces from the southern part of Ukraine, because we have already an experience after withdrawal, provocations starting, and all of that. People is being shooted and all of that stuff. So, but I can imagine that at one point after total liberation of Donbass, a new suggestion for talks will come to the surface, and sooner or later leadership in Kiev should decide what do they prefer to do, either to strike a deal or continue this slipping downhill, because economy does not work in Ukraine. Ukraine was the poorest country in Europe even before the conflict. Right now, I cannot even imagine what's going to happen with so many young men, and not very young men, and men in 50s are in a combat forces in the east. But these ideas that Ukraine is requesting, it requested in Lugano $750 billion dollars for reconstruction. They are idealistic, and I haven't seen any serious support on the side of Europeans and all those who has come in Lugano for such a support. So London has promised a new conference pretty soon, but what are the efforts of London? What are the capacities of London, with the exception of supplying them with weapons? They are just very limited. Still, it will be damaging for British economy.
I wanted to also ask about the dangers in this situation. We hear from Moscow, from the Kremlin, from MID, that the West is creating an extremely dangerous situation by arming Ukraine. I mean, is there a danger here that there will be some sort of conflict between Russia and the West, or is there already a conflict between Russia and the West?
I would not exaggerate this topic. We are not in a state of war, neither with any country in member of NATO. We fully understand what NATO is about, what are NATO guarantees. But it brings us, of course, closer to the hot conflict if escalation is possible, of course. If we will see that flow of weapon will be organized in such a way that it endangers our strategic situation, our defense, and all of that, of course, we will have to take serious measures against it.
And do you think that the West understands Russia's perspective on the causes of this war?
No, I'm sure that it does not understand. It has created a narrative a narrative is very short. It means that Russia has made an aggression against an innocent Ukraine, which is not true at all, because the build-up of Ukraine as an adversary of Russia has continued during 20 years, and it has been intensified since 2014, since this coup d'etat in Ukraine, when the Yanukovych has been thrown out and the nationalistic forces has taken up in the government, and build-up of nationalism in Ukraine. I don't see that Europe understands what is Ukrainian nationalism, but now you can see clearly how serious is the fortress that has been built up by Ukrainians close to Donbass and in Donbass itself, how many forces they have concentrated there, how many fortified places and regions has been constructed during this year. So Ukrainians were preparing really for the war during these 8 years with encouragement and finance from US, UK as well, and some other countries.
If we look at the sort of big picture over the sort of 50 to 100-year span, are we in? We're in a sort of confrontation between different views of the world. Russia has its view, China has its view, the West has its view. Is Russia going to go closer to China now because of this? Because the West doesn't want to be friends with
Very much, I will say. Minister Lavrov has met Minister Van today in Indonesia, and yes, of course, I cannot say that we have relationship with China like here members of the European Union, but we're getting closer not only politically but also economically. Right now, we have a lot of exchanges. Trade has grown by, I think, 40 or 50% in the recent time, and it is, if sanctions will continue to be imposed on Russian economy, of course, we shall make a big turn economically to China and the East. We have already established parallel importation, and we shall have more Chinese cars. BMW and Mercedes is probably in Russia, but they are now not so bad quality.
Could I just ask one question for Russian television, because our clients include Russian television? Сегодня Борис Джонсон заявил о своем отставке. Скажите, пожалуйста, как вы видите Джонсон? Все-таки друг ли он был России или нет? Спасибо.
Да нет, я не могу сказать, что он был другом России совершенно. Это не так. Особенно в последнее время он сделал целый ряд заявлений, которые ставят его в позицию противника России. И особенно в последнее время. И он, я скажу, гнул эту линию в течение последнего полугодия. И, конечно, он говорил также о том, что больше никогда не будет встречаться с Путиным, что не будет, что с ним нельзя иметь дело и так далее. Мы все это приняли к сведению, без сомнения. И я прекрасно понимаю, что у нас в отношении Бориса Джонсона мнение сформировалось. Мы будем отвечать тем же самым.
Спасибо.
Спасибо большое.
Спасибо.